What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to get into the spirit of Halloween by building a simple jack-o'-lantern out of a fence picket. So let's get started. First, I like to save myself some sanding and run all the boards through my planer. This is a 13-inch planer by Weaver. Disclaimer, I'm not affiliated with Weaver in any way, just keeping you informed on what's good and what I like to use in my shop. If you don't have a planer, I highly recommend sanding the entire board before cutting any of the pieces. I set a stop block at 9 inches on my miter saw and cut 4 pieces. These will be your sides and your front and back. Then I cut 2 pieces 6 1/8 inch, which will become the top lid and also the bottom. Then I follow that up by cutting the candle holder, which is 3 3/4 by 4 1/4 inches. Next, you'll need 2 of the 9-inch pieces ripped to 4 inches wide. Normally when I do a lot of these, I use a table saw for, but in the video I'll be staying at the miter saw. Make sure that you save the cutoff piece because you'll need it later. And if you're following along, you should have a pile that looks something like this. Now, using a straight edge, I mark a line from corner to corner on the candle holder, and using the 1.5 inch Forstner bit, I drill about 3/8 of an inch deep. Be sure to use a scrap block underneath this piece when drilling to avoid table damage. And now over to the sander. Over at the sander, I just smooth off the edges of each piece, not taking off a whole lot, just trying to give it that nice, smooth, clean look. There'll be a lot less hand sanding later. Make sure if you're doing this that you use a dust mask or some sort of respirator, especially if you're using treated wood. With my sanding complete, it's time for assembly. I use Titebond 3 waterproof wood glue and a brad nailer. I begin assembling the pumpkin box using the wood glue on the edges, and then I just secure them down with a brad nail just to give it a little bit of extra stability. I put 3 down each side that I'll come back later with wood filler and fill in the holes. Make sure to lightly use your glue, especially if you're going to be staining, and make sure to quickly clean up any squeeze out. A lot of stains don't take the wood glue very well, so you don't want to over glue and then realize later you got a bunch of streaks in your project. Next, I clamp down the box and decide on a face for the jack-o'-lantern. I made templates for my router to speed up the process, so that's what I'll be using. Once I decide on a face, I clamp the template to the box. Now, using my plunge router with a bushing insert and a spiral cut bit, I carefully cut out the design from the face of the box. Using the router, I just lower the bit around 1/8 of an inch at a time and go around until the piece comes out completely. If you don't have a router, a jigsaw is another great way to cut out the face. That's actually how I started, but after I built so many of these last year, I had to find a faster way to make the faces. So I started doing a bunch of experimenting with a router. Every now and then you will have to stop and use the air blow off tip to blow out some of the dust. It seems to make it a lot harder once the pockets fill up with dust, but I always just blow them out and then start back to cutting. Just remember to take your time and be safe. This process can be long and tedious, but I try not to force my bit. I just let it do its job and go slow and easy. And sometimes I just try to listen to the sound of the bit as it cuts through the wood. If you force it, you'll get a louder scream kind of to it, more of a higher pitched sound. So the slower you go and the more shallow you go each time you go around, then the less likely you are to damage your bit or damage your. damage your. project. project.. project. 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 Getting toward the end here, after all the pieces have been cut out and kind of fall through, I just lower my bit all the way down just to make sure I can go smoothly around a couple more times just to make sure every little piece is out. Now I just use a piece of sandpaper to take the little fuzzies off around the eyes and the mouth. Doesn't have to do a whole lot here, but you can also hit your corners too and kind of give them a smooth edge as well. I use wood filler to cover any nail holes up to this point. It gives the pumpkin a lot cleaner look when you're finished. I just apply it and then I use a straight edge to scrape some of the excess off, and I let it dry and then sand it smooth. You want to kind of do this before you install the lid. It makes the sanding it back off a lot easier. And while you're here, go ahead and knock those sharp corners off as well. Using a round over bit, I round over the edges of the lid, the base, and the candle holder. Make sure to go slow when you're going across the grain, or it can splinter on you pretty good, and it's hard to cover that up with stain or anything else. And as always, if you've been following along with the video, you should start to look like this. Next, I create the stem using one of the cutoff pieces we ripped off at the beginning of the video. I make mine 2 1/4 inches long, but you can go any size you want. Just be sure to cut off one corner at a 45-degree angle before cutting it. It makes it a lot easier and safer to hold on to. Now I just shape it on the grinder, smoothing it and rounding the edges until it has a good look and feel. Next, I attach the stem to the lid using wood glue and brad nails. I use a template I made to help me not mess with the brad nail when shooting from underneath. You can just measure to the center and mark for the stem location on the top and bottom. But the template saves me a lot of time when I'm doing mass production on these. Once that's complete, I attach the candle holder and the base using wood glue and brad nails. I put glue on the bottom of the candle holder and I just kind of eyeball it in place on the base. And then I place the box back over the top of it and get it center inside the box. Then 4 brad nails, I finish it up. Moving on to the lid, I attach it to the pumpkin body using the same method of wood glue and brad nails. Just lightly go around the top edge with glue and then center the lid. Using 4 brad nails, just lock it down in place. Then I go back with wood filler and fill the holes. If you don't want to do that, you can move on to the finishing process, but I think it looks a lot better to me when the holes have been filled in and sanded. I use my straight edge to scrape off any of the excess. Then I sand it smooth, as well as the edges where the router crossed over the grain, leaving the little bitty holes and divots that you see. Also at this time, I round the corners down just a little bit too, so they're not so sharp. And just anything else you see on there that has a little rough feel to it, I go ahead and sand it as well. And that's it. Time to move on to the finishing. Now using a torch, I lightly burn all the pieces, front, back, and on the edges to give it that kind of rustic look. Be sure to keep the flame moving in a steady motion to avoid overburning or creating black spots. If you do overburn any areas though, don't worry, just sand them down to lighten them up a bit. If you oversand, same reverse process, just reburn the places that were a little lighter. I burn in the eyes and the mouth, but try not to burn the walls of the inside of the pumpkin. You want it to stay kind of lighter so when your candle's in there later, it puts off a lot of light. Special tips, use some scrap wood on your table so you don't burn the tabletop. And also, if you're doing these inside and you're using treated fence pickets, make sure to wear the proper breathing gear, a respirator, or something in a well-ventilated area. Now with the burning process complete, I go back in with a little bit of sandpaper and kind of touch up any bright, shiny blackness I see around the eyes or mouth. And if it feels like it's a little light to me, as you notice, I go back and I burn it just a little bit more. So now let's glove up and apply some orange stain. Using the old rag, I apply the stain and just try to coat the entire pumpkin and the base. I paint inside the eyes and inside the mouth. This will give it that classic jack-o'-lantern color. Be sure to not let the stain puddle or stand long in one place. If you do this, it'll leave spots that are very hard to cover. You may end up finding yourself sanding them back off and redoing it. Just keep your rag moving, wipe off any excess you see, and just have fun with it. I mean, after all, this is the final step. So now in those hard to reach places, I like to just take a small paintbrush and dab a little bit of stain on there and just paint inside your mouth, go around your eyes, any places you see bare wood. Just again, remember, do not let it puddle or stand anywhere on the wood or it will leave a spot. So just take your time here, try not to paint outside the lines and just get it all coated where everything is orange and it all matches. So now I just continue around with a paintbrush, and anywhere I see bare wood, I make sure that I coat it and wipe off the excess again and just go over it completely. You'll notice anything that's not orange at this time, so just go back with a brush or go back with your rag. But just remember to always keep wiping, keep wiping. Finally, I like to put my mark on the bottom and insert my tea light and then give it a good test run. Look at that glow. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the way out. Please feel free to share your own jack-o'-lantern creations in the comments. Happy Halloween, everybody, and I'll see you on the next one.